Hi, this is Pam Martin at the Wetlands Center here at Cheyenne Bottoms. And today, well, do you know what? For lunch, I had a sandwich. Actually, it was a chicken sandwich. I had strawberries and I had some pretzel sticks. What did you have for lunch? Think about that for a second. And think, did you have something that had to do with plants? Now, I had a lot of plant material in there. You wouldn't think so. You think pretzel sticks, huh? But what's the main ingredient in pretzel sticks? Flour. Where does flour come from? Wheat. At least in this case, this is wheat flour. That's a plant, right? Strawberries, of course, are a plant. The chicken isn't a plant, but the chicken ate seed from a plant. And what was the chicken sandwich in? The chicken was in bread. Again, wheat flour. So plants are where it's at, guys. And that's what I'm dressed up as. A type of plant that grows in the wetlands here at Cheyenne Bottoms. Well, it's a kind of plant-like. I'll tell you that. It's green and it grows in the water. What do you think I am? I'm going to give you like 5 seconds to think about that. Do you have any ideas? A lot of people say seaweed, and it does look like seaweed, doesn't it? It looks kind of like even like kelp. And this plant is kind of hard to dress up as. But what I'm supposed to be is algae. And algae is that green, slimy stuff that's in the water. It can even make the water look all green. It can be on the rocks in the water. And I have a picture here to show you what it looks like. We're going to zoom in on that so that you can see that a little bit. But notice how it's really kind of ooey gooey looking, right? This is a lot of algae. Most of the time, there's not quite this much algae in the water, but it's green, right? So green in plants means it's making its own food. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this down. And then we're going to talk about how plants make their own food. Plants are producers. In other words, if we have to get food, we either have to make it, right? Like make a cake or make bread, buy it at the store. Someone else has made it with different materials. Well, plants produce their food by using the sunlight, by using water, and something in the air called carbon dioxide. You can't see it, but it's there along with oxygen and nitrogen. So the plants use those 3 ingredients to make food. And guess what they eat, guys? Sugars! They eat sugar! Wow, how about that, right? So from those 3 ingredients, they produce sugars that fuel the plant. That's their food. And then they also produce some water. They give off some water, some extra water. And they also give off oxygen. And what do we need to breathe out of the air? Oxygen. Guess what we breathe out? We respire out carbon dioxide. So we're providing carbon dioxide for the plants, and the plants are providing oxygen for us. Isn't that an amazing cycle, either one? So plants are the producers. Everything depends on plants. So I'm algae. Now there's some other types of plants in the wetlands. In fact, there's quite a few. But algae grows in the water. Another type of plant is this guy. Okay, and I know some of you know what this is. This is called cattails. Now, it doesn't look like a cat's tail at all, does it? But this part looks more like a corn dog, an overdone corn dog. But it's very soft. If you could feel this, it almost feels like velvet. This is the seed head. And it's soft like a cat's tail. Makes a little more sense that way, doesn't it? Now, this is when it's mature, okay? It is already, the leaves are brown, the stem is brown, and this seed is ready to pop. which is what it does. It just explodes when it's ready and the seeds fly everywhere. But when it's growing, it looks like this. So there you can see that it's green, right? Green means it's making its own food. It's a producer. So here we have two major producers in the wetlands, the cattails and the algae. Okay, now, what do you think might eat cattails? What do you think might eat algae? Think about what's in the water or around the water, animals that live around the water. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about that. Okay, I bet you came up with things like fish, turtles, frogs, ducks, some insects maybe, like dragonflies. Yeah, and something called a mayfly. Wow. And midges. Midges are really important for food for other animals. Okay, so remember, we've got the producer. Now, let's just go with one type of animal that would eat, let's say, algae. Okay? Something that would eat algae is it's pretty small. These are called ghost shrimp. Okay? Now, they're not see-through right now, but if you would catch those, oh, do I need to step up?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, step up, and I'm going to go right here so that we can focus in on that, because these are really, really cool. Did you know that shrimp grow or live in fresh water? They do. They don't only live in the ocean. The ones we eat live in the ocean, but you know what? You could eat these. It would just take a lot more of them for a meal. So glass shrimp or ghost shrimp, they're known by both names. When they're alive, they're see-through. In other words, you can see all their organs inside their little heart and their digestive system. But when they die, they become opaque. You can't see through them anymore. But that's where that name comes from. So these little shrimp eat algae in the water. They eat other little particles in the water too. And they eat dead things. So they're not only, now we're going to introduce another word, they're a consumer because they're eating a plant. They're consuming a plant. They're not producing their own food. They're consuming something that's already produced food or has died, like dead algae or a dead fish. So that makes them a decomposer, or there's another word for it too, detritivore, which is really fancy. But it just means that they eat dead things, and when they eat those dead things, they're making other food. So they're kind of a combo here. They're a little bit of a producer, but they're mostly a consumer. And this would be a primary consumer. Primary means first level. So they're eating the plant. Okay? Now I'm going to put them up, and we're going to go up the food chain. Okay? Which is another word, but we'll go back to that in a second. So, something that would eat those shrimp. How about this guy? Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to see if I can get him out, because it's going to be a little hard. Oh, this is a new, no, maybe not. This is a new terrarium, so it doesn't want to open really well. So I'm going to bring him about here. There we go. We're going to raise him up, raise him up. Okay, I'll try and get him out here in a second. But this, again, this is a mud turtle. Now this is a young one. He's only about 2 years old. And when we first got him, he was about the size of a quarter because he had just hatched from his egg. Mud turtles like to live in the mud, and you notice that they're the color of mud. I'm going to try and get him out again. Let me try a little harder here. I shouldn't have put it on quite so tightly. Here, I know what to do. We'll just go at it this way, because he's small enough I can get him out. There he is! Okay, here we go. Now you can see him better, I bet. I'm going to zoom in on him. Okay, so this is our little mud turtle. And you notice he's gone into his shell. He's the only other turtle besides box turtles that has this little hinge on his shell, so he can shut down like a box, just like a box turtle. They're the only other one in Cheyenne Bottoms that can do that. So he's got this nice top shell called a carapace, the bottom shell called a plastron, and then this is called the bridge because it connects the two. Now, our little mud turtle here, and he's kind of shy, but he's cute as the dickens. He eats those shrimp, and he also eats some plants. So here we have an animal that's eating both plants and animals called an omnivore. An omnivore is something that eats both plants and animals. Ah, do we do that? We sure do. So we're omnivores. Now the shrimp that I showed you earlier, they're an herbivore, something that only eats plant material. Now they also eat dead stuff, but that's when we talked about being a decomposer or a detritivore. So here we have a secondary consumer because he's eating something that's eating a plant. So you see how that works? You've got plants on the bottom, then you've got your primary consumers that eat the plants, and then you've got your secondary consumers that eat maybe the plants and definitely the consumer, the primary consumer. Okay, I'm going to put him up. I should have had paper towels here. I don't. Okay, so our little turtle. Now, this little turtle, when they're that small, what do you think might eat them? Give you 3 seconds this time. Okay, do you have anything in mind? How about raccoons? Ooh, raccoons will eat a little turtle like this. Yeah, or, let's see, what do I have back here? How about this guy? A fox. Ooh, this is a red fox. And we have red fox. Now, of course, they don't live in the water, do they? They live in the along the edge. So you'll see fox, bobcat, coyote, raccoons, opossum, skunks, all along the edge of the water, and they're looking for eggs, they're looking for baby turtles, looking for fish, for crayfish, all kinds of animals that live along the edge of the wetlands. Because now fox won't mind going into the water, but they don't like to really go in deep. But if that little turtle is along the edge, our fox will have him for a meal. Okay, so this guy is a carnivore. Now, mostly, I say that, they're almost exclusively a carnivore, but they will eat some fruit, just like coyotes will. Say there's a mulberry tree nearby. They like mulberries. They might even, if they're really hungry in the summer, eat a tomato out of your garden. But mostly they're going to eat other animals, like our little turtle here, or mice, or rats, or rabbits. So now we have what we call a tertiary consumer. He's eating the secondary consumer, the turtle, and the turtle's eating, remember, the shrimp. And not much would eat a fox. The tertiary are at the very top, but there's something called an apex predator. That's even above a fox. Can you think of something that would eat a fox? How about a coyote? Coyotes will kill fox and eat them. Not regularly, but they will. Okay, so what we just did is we just went through a food chain. A food chain is just who eats who. So we started with the algae as our producer. Then we went to the shrimp, who is a primary consumer. They ate the algae. And then we went to the turtle that eats the shrimp, so they're secondary. Then we went to the fox, who eats the turtle. So they are tertiary. Make sense? Okay, now we're going to get a little more complicated. we're going to go back to our cattails. Okay, remember our cattails, they're growing up out of the water. And lots of insects eat cattails. There's actually quite a few animals that eat the cattails. Not so much the seed, because it's just so tiny, it doesn't have much food value. But they'll eat the leaves, they'll eat the stems, they'll eat the sprouts. And one of those insects is crickets. Okay, I'm going to bring in, well, let's see. Let's take this off. Because these crickets aren't that big. And I'm going to kind of, whoops, there goes some algae. I'm going to kind of tilt it. And we'll see. There we go. You guys can see those crickets. Just let the camera focus. There we go. So if you'll notice, what are these crickets in? Corn flakes. Corn is a plant, right? Yeah. So crickets aren't real picky. They eat about any plant. They do like corn, they like wheat, they like oats, but that's just when we're trying to raise them. When they're out in the wild, they're eating grasses, they're eating cattails along the edge of the wetlands. So they would be what? Remember, a primary consumer, right? They're eating the plant. Very good. Okay, now we're going to go to something that would eat that cricket. How about, now this one I definitely can't get out. How about a frog? This is a leopard frog. So called because he has those spots like a leopard. Leopard frogs are really common in Cheyenne Bottoms. They're everywhere, just like bullfrogs. And they eat insects, don't they? With that really long, lovely tongue that's kind of sticky and is kind of curled up in their mouth. And then when the cricket walks by or hops by, he'll jump at it, stick his tongue out lightning fast, grab it, roll it in the back of his mouth, and down it goes. And they blink. This is pretty funny, guys. They blink when they swallow. And the reason they do that, okay, this is pretty cool, is their eyeballs actually go into their mouth. Now, not all the way, but part of the way. So it helps push that cricket down into their throat because they only have little tiny teeth clear at the back of their jaw. So they don't really crunch things up. Okay, they eat their food whole. Now, what would the leopard frog be? What type of consumer? He eats the cricket, so he would be a secondary, right? I know you got that right. Very good. Okay, so let's put our leopard frog away. And now, it'll take me just a second to get this guy out. Okay, so you think, while I'm doing that, what would eat the frog? What that lives in the wetlands would eat the frog? Okay, do you have some ideas? Oh. I'll pull him out here. There's actually several things that will eat frogs. Oh, but one of them is a snake. Now this is a plains rat snake, and we don't have the type of snake that loves frogs. Garter snakes love frogs, and you find garter snakes around your house. They're the ones with the orange or yellow stripe and kind of a dark gray, and then with that orange. We have two types of garter snakes here: the common and the plains garter snake. Also, we have a lot of water snakes, diamondback and northern, and they'll just gobble that frog down. But they're kind of nasty. They're aggressive and they bite. This guy's very gentle, and he's used to being handled. But it all works the same. He is going to grab that frog. He's going to lie in wait for the frog, or actually hunt the frog. And the frog's defense, of course, is to leap as far as they can. But boy, snakes are actually pretty efficient at catching frogs. So snakes, they do not eat plants. They are a total carnivore, guys. No plants in their diet. So here we have a total carnivore. And where are we at on our food chain? Let's see. We started with the cattail, and then the cricket ate the cattail, so that's primary. The frog ate the cricket, so that's secondary. So the snake would be tertiary, right? Up at the top there. Yeah. And do you see him sticking his tongue out? Anybody know why they do that? I bet you know. It's to smell, isn't it? They smell with their tongues. Pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. Isn't he pretty? He is just a beautiful snake. Okay, now I'm going to put him away. And think about, while I put him away, what would eat the snake? And I see this, actually, I've got to tie this pretty tightly because he's a skinny snake. And I don't want him to escape. Okay, here we go. I just made the frog jump. There. Okay. Have you thought about it? What do you think? What would eat the snake? Comes from the air. Oh, we're going to reach over the fox. A hawk. Hawks eat lots of snakes. This is a Swainson's hawk. Mostly what we would have here are red-tailed hawks. And you know what, when I see them, because I pay attention to this stuff, a lot of times what I see them catching are snakes. They eat a lot of snakes. So hawks are kind of air death for snakes because the snake doesn't really see them coming because they're low to the ground, right? So it's pretty good prey for a hawk. So the hawk is going to be your apex predator. It's a tertiary consumer. But it's at the top, because what's going to eat this hawk? Not much. Once it's an adult. Maybe an eagle, but that would be pretty rare. Very, very rare. When they're younger, yes, you know, raccoons, whatever, could get into a nest. But once they're an adult, they're a fierce, top of the top predator. Okay, I'm going to put him up. Oops. Okay. So that was a little bit more complicated of a food chain. Now we're going to make it even more complicated. Here is a duck. This is a mallard duck. This is a mallard duck. It's a dabbling duck. And you've probably seen these at the zoo. We have a lot of them out here on the bottoms. And dabbling means that you see them a lot of times bottoms up. Right? Or you see them with their heads down and with their bills and they're going, you know, like this in the water. And this is pretty cool. Their bill, and with this camera you wouldn't be able to see this, but they have these little serrated, jagged edges on their bill. So they're putting water in their mouth and it acts like a strainer. The water flows out, but those little jagged edges leave the seeds and the insects and the shrimp inside. Yeah, there's lots of things they're eating on the top of the water. Duckweed, which is another plant. So this is another consumer, right? And an omnivore that's eating both animals and plants. And so you could have, what we've done is a very linear, in other words, type of chain, just like a paper chain or a chain that your dog for a leash. But now we're getting into a food web. A food web is the fact that there's all these different chains coming off of those producers. And this would be one of those offshoots from the algae, maybe the cattail seed. They'll eat a little bit of it. They're not real keen on it, but they'll eat it. So that's one that could come off of that chain. There have to be an offshoot. And here's another one. This is one of my favorites. And this is actually one of the top predators in Cheyenne Bottoms. You guys know what that is? It looks kind of like a ferret, doesn't it? And it's related to ferrets. It's a mink. Mink are related to weasels, otters, like I said, ferrets, and they're fierce little animals. They eat some fish, but mostly they eat a little animal called a muskrat. which looks like a miniature beaver, except it has like a rat-type tail, a bear tail. And unfortunately, I don't have a stuffed muskrat to show you, so this guy would be another little branch off of our chain, another chain. Up at the top, there's not a whole lot that eat mink because they are pretty fierce, but if a bobcat or a coyote took it upon themselves, they would eat one. So they would be a tertiary consumer. Make sense? Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a slide up, and you will see a food web from the wetlands and all these different little shoots that go off. It's almost like a tree. Or they call it a web, like a spider web. You know, you've got all those strands going off of it. So I'll let you look at that. Notice that the arrows point from the animal being eaten to the animal eating it, like the fish to the great blue heron. And then we're going to come back and talk just briefly about energy. Now, you need energy to survive, right? That's why you eat food. Food is fuel for our bodies to have energy for us to survive. Now, we as humans are at the point where we work together to produce food. We have farmers that produce the plant food for us, and then we have ranchers that produce meat for us, like cattle and pigs and sheep and chickens. But if you're an animal like we've just been talking about, you have to expend energy. In other words, you have to use energy to find that food. Now the plants, like our cattail, they're not really moving, are they? They're not having to expend a lot of energy to make their food. They're taking things in their habitat, the sun, the water, the carbon dioxide, to make their food, to produce it. But the cricket has to use some energy to find that food, right? Now, not a whole lot. At that primary level, they're not expending quite as much energy as, say, we'll get to that in a second. Well, no, I better go ahead. As, say, our fox. Because what's the fox have to do? He's really got to work to hunt, to find that rabbit or that turtle, okay? He's got to use a lot of energy. There's a lot of cattails. There's a lot of grass. So they don't have to look as hard and use as much energy to find their food. So on the lower level, at the primary consumer, they're not going to use as much energy to find their food as at the secondary level or at the tertiary level. The higher you go, the more energy that animal has to use to find its food. Pretty cool, huh? It's all this wonderful, wonderful cycle that is supporting, each level supports the other. Okay, now I bet you have some questions. And if you do, your teacher can send those questions to me and I'd be quite willing to answer them. And I have an activity at the end that you can work on too. So next time you come out to the bottoms, and I hope you will, look at all the birds and think, what is that duck eating? What is that red-winged blackbird eating? How's he getting that food? Does it go back to a plant? I bet it does. Well, thank you, and you have a wonderful day.